I've wanted to make a video about this movie for the longest time, but it was kind of hard to articulate any of my thoughts on the Batman because there are just so many good aspects of this film. So while I'll probably end up making multiple videos about the Batman, for my first one I wanted to discuss the core characters and the theme of this movie, the concept of vengeance, and why ultimately it will never be enough, which is why Bruce has to turn to something else, being a symbol of hope. While the movie quite literally spells this out in the closing sequence, I wanted to highlight how Reeves and his team built this arc so masterfully so more people can appreciate the brilliance of this movie's writing. So join me as we explore the core of Batman's origin, vengeance.
I'm vengeance.
Okay, so to really deep dive into the subject, we're going to explore the following points: defining vengeance, themes of vengeance in the Batman, and where vengeance falls short, starting with the first point: defining vengeance. So when we're talking about taking vengeance or revenge in most contexts, we are really talking about the age-old rule of an eye for an eye, where we want to make someone else or a group of other people feel how we felt for some sense of catharsis. In this movie, vengeance is a reoccurring theme in multiple characters due to the rampant corruption in Gotham. Many characters feel like the concept of justice does not exist anymore, or at least that justice was not delivered to them. And in that void, they decide to take up some form of vengeance as compensation. Revenge or vengeance is often a motivation for protagonists like Batman, who tend to have darker personalities. But what I think makes Batman so captivating is that unlike other characters who realize that vengeance is not worth it, he doesn't just do away with vengeance and pretend to be above it. He grapples with it every day. It's often a test that his villains pose him with. The reason I love this is because Bruce is constantly trying to be a good person despite his personal trauma pulling him in a darker direction. This tying into him being one of the only human members of the Justice League is always a great story beat. To struggle is to be human, and Batman is one of the greatest heroes to constantly portray this. Okay, now that we've defined what vengeance is broadly, let's move along to some specific characters and examples found within the Batman. For Batman himself, his motivations being driven by vengeance is spelled out quite plainly when we first meet the character. He wants to instill this deep sense of fear into wrongdoers because that's exactly what he felt when his parents died. So as we said, an eye for an eye. That night, he lost his sense of comfort and security, so he wants to rob that from everyone else. In most Batman iterations, the person who kills Bruce's parents is Joe Chill, and there have been attempts in other Batman stories to make Joe into a relevant character in the grand scheme of things, but I personally feel like Batman's early motivations are rougher around the edges when Joe Chill is just some random criminal, because then Batman can't put all of his effort into destroying a specific person or group. He has to put his effort into solving the systemic problems in Gotham, starting with organized crime. In The Batman, I think the writers left the question of who killed the Waynes without a definite answer for this reason exactly. Without Bruce having all the pieces, he is forced to uproot and confront the very rotten core of Gotham. In fact, early in the movie, we see that Batman isn't really even targeting organized crime, but rather just violent crime, which is a symptom of a deeper problem. In Frank Miller's Batman Year One comic, one of the first things Bruce does as Batman is directly confront the families that run the Gotham criminal underworld. However, in this version, Bruce is already in his second year of being Batman and has yet to confront Penguin, who at this point is still like a mid-level mobster. In many of his interviews, Robert Pattinson references how Bruce is just reliving the night his parents died in his head and playing out a fantasy where he has the power to prevent their deaths from happening. At this point in the story, although he wants Gotham to heal from its problems, he's mostly going out as Batman to gain some sort of closure for his trauma, which is why he takes a little bit of joy in recording and reliving these experiences in the morning. Something very appealing about this version of Batman is how uncertain he is about his effectiveness, but he continues to be Batman anyway. He doesn't really care about what happens to him because if this doesn't work out, he has nothing else. That nihilistic approach I feel is really dark, because even in the Nolanverse, as early as the second film, we see Bruce sort of lingering for a life after Batman. But in this iteration, there's nothing after Batman and his vengeance, only failure and death. That sort of motivation leads to a Batman who thinks himself stronger because he has nothing to lose. But as we see in the movie, this clearly isn't the case, which is when he realizes vengeance will only get him so far, and that for him and Gotham to truly heal, he needs to be something more. There are two other characters in this film that are also primarily motivated by vengeance, and each of them have a very different arc. The first character who is clearly motivated by vengeance is the Riddler. He, like the Batman, confronts the issues of Gotham. Despite having similar motivations, they have very different methods of enacting their revenge. Batman wants to violently put fear into any wrongdoer, which early in the movie he believes will prevent people from committing crime. Riddler sees these problems in Gotham and decides that the whole system has to go because it is far beyond saving. They really seem like they're on two opposite ends of the spectrum when it comes to confronting crime in Gotham. Batman, who wants to beat up low-level criminals to a pulp in order to improve Gotham, and a Riddler who targets anyone who is remotely close to the Gotham Renewal Fund, like Bruce Wayne, who had no public or private connection to it, to absolutely destroy Gotham. I absolutely love how these two characters' arcs are intertwined, because Riddler is a static character, meaning he doesn't really change much throughout the story. Batman is obviously a dynamic character who developed a lot between when we met him and where the movie ends. So in many ways, when the Batman meets the Riddler face to face for the first time during the third act, it's like Batman meeting an earlier twisted sense of himself. This meeting serves as a confrontation for Bruce because it shows him how easily someone could take his personal motivations and contort them into something darker and more sinister. All of this is quite literally unmasked when Jim confronts one of Riddler's followers, and he responds much like Batman would by saying that he is vengeance. So Batman really sees at this point how other people see the Batman, not as some savior, but as someone just enacting his personal vengeance on anyone he feels has wronged him. The opening fight scene displays this perfectly, as the man who Bruce saves from getting assaulted is equally fearful of Batman as he was the gang members. So clearly he didn't really make citizens feel any safer. The second character who has vengeance as her core theme is Catwoman, who had a very similar origin to Batman. An important maternal figure of hers was killed when she was just a child, making her an orphan by means of violence. The biggest difference between these two characters is that Selina does not come from a place of privilege. Bruce had the privilege of wealth, which allowed him to completely remove himself from the situation and isolate in an attempt to heal himself of his trauma. However, Selina did not have that luxury. She was put into the foster system and had to adapt to the criminal world in order to survive. So in essence, Batman is born out of this place of extreme privilege, but Catwoman was almost born out of necessity. So when these characters meet for the first time, Batman completely misunderstands her and why she's involved in the situation with the mayor and Falcone. He wrongly believes that she chose to be involved with this criminal element. For Selina, vengeance isn't even about lashing out at everyone in Gotham like the Riddler. Unlike him, she sort of just accepts Gotham for what it is and does what she can to protect those she loves and get on by her own. But when that life that she has scraped together for herself is taken from her, that's when she decides to go after Falcone. Ultimately, it's Batman that stops her from enacting her vengeance because he knows that if she crosses that line, she will have to face the consequences, even though Falcone kind of had it coming. Which is why when Falcone is ultimately killed, she's secretly happy and satisfied with this conclusion, in contrast to Bruce, who sort of looks on in shock and horror. We can see the origins of Catwoman laid out really well in this movie. She's someone who isn't motivated by a sense of moral superiority like the Riddler or Batman. Rather, she just wants to get what she feels is owed to her. She doesn't aspire to be greater or for the world to change. She accepts things for what they are and seeks to improve her own lot the best she can. I think of her as somewhere between Bruce and the Riddler. On the one hand, you have Batman, who is desperately trying to save Gotham and improve it. On the other hand, you have Riddler, who is trying to literally wash it away and destroy everything that Gotham is. And somewhere in the middle is Selina, who kind of just accepts Gotham for what it is, which is one of the reasons Bruce and Selina have this irreconcilable ending. Bruce understands that vengeance vengeance will not be enough for him and dedicates himself to something greater. Whereas for Selina, she kind of just accepts Gotham will always be doomed and leaves for something else. Just as a side note, this was a great reversal of their origins. Selina, who couldn't escape Gotham as a child and was forced to survive within it, is finally allowed to leave, and Bruce, who is really never engaged with the reality that is Gotham thanks to his privilege, is now more or less tied to the city until he dies. But if you really understand Selina's character, you know that she is kind of doomed to always revert back to being a cat burglar. She doesn't change after she achieves her vengeance. She just moves on to her next score. I think this is also one of the major reasons Selina has remained a side character on the big screen. She is always adjacent to Batman instead of her own character, which doesn't really allow her to grow, or only grow in order to further Batman's narrative. I do hope that one day we get to see more of Catwoman on her own, in the same light as we have seen an exploration of a Harley Quinn without a Joker. I know there have been a couple comic runs where she existed in a Gotham during Bruce's death. I'm referring specifically to Gotham City Sirens. It's a run that I haven't yet read, but it looks pretty promising. I think her gray morality, much like Harley's, would allow for really interesting stories if she could just get out from the shadow of the Caped Crusader. Okay, now that we've taken a look at how vengeance is portrayed in each of these characters, let's zoom in on Batman's arc to better understand how vengeance isn't enough in the long run. The ending speech Bruce delivers on the stadium rooftop is ultimately him saying verbatim why vengeance won't be enough for both himself and for Gotham. So let's bisect some of his words and understand what he means for both Gotham and himself. I have had an effect here, but not the one I intended. Vengeance won't change the past, mine or anyone else's. So as I said before, Robert Pattinson has spoken at length on how his Batman is just reliving that night his parents died every time he steps out into the streets of Gotham. Only this time he has the power to stop the criminal. However, through the events of the movie, he starts to realize that he could realistically do this his entire life and it wouldn't change a thing. Vengeance wouldn't bring him any closure, nor will it bring anyone else any closure. Riddler could have destroyed all of Gotham, but it wouldn't change the fact that he was mistreated at that orphanage. Selina could have killed Falcone, but it wouldn't have brought back Annika or her mother. As far as the effect he describes, he's talking about how the people of Gotham are starting to view him as a positive figure in society. Right before this, he was sort of just called a vigilante, which has a sort of negative connotation. When he first set out to become the Batman, he had no intention of being viewed as a beacon of hope. He only wanted to instill fear into criminals. However, he slowly starts to realize that he's becoming a sort of icon of Gotham as its protector, which is why he says, I have to become more. People need hope. To know someone's out there for them. The city's angry, scarred, like me. Our scars can destroy us, even after the physical wounds have healed. But if we survive them, they can transform us. They can give us the power to endure, and the strength to fight. So in this section, he's really getting into what he needs to do in order to move on from his trauma. Earlier in the film, we already see glimpses of Bruce aligning the Batman identity with his family's legacy. However, in that point of the film, he's still this immature Batman who wasn't serving as Gotham's protector, but now he's starting to piece together the values instilled into him by Alfred and his parents with the Batman. He's also verbalizing some of the things that we've been talking about. If he continued down the path of vengeance, eventually it would destroy him, but thanks to the people around him, he was able to confront himself and grow as a person. He also wants the same for Gotham. He sees that the people really have no voice because their lives have been largely controlled by politicians and mobsters. They too, like Bruce, have faced this collective trauma in their lives and are angry, which is what gives rise to villains like the Riddler that seek to destroy everything around them to gain some sort of control. Even after Gotham going through a process of healing, the scars that have been left behind still have the potential to destroy the city by fueling many within it to rise up in the name of vengeance. But if Gotham survives, then it too can transform into something more than just a crime-filled city. This section about the city having scars that can destroy it is also a great setup for the motivations of future Batman villains. That really is the purpose of Batman, to me, to protect the people of Gotham from those that get caught up in vengeance instead of healing. But unlike other heroes, Batman grapples with the darkest parts of himself every day. So in a way, the people of Gotham are reflected in him. When he overcomes his personal challenges and stays on this righteous path, he serves as a reminder to the citizens of Gotham that they too can do the same. Thanks for watching, everybody. If you made it to this point in the video, please leave a comment about some of your thoughts on the themes of vengeance in the Batman down below. And if you want to see more discussions around the Batman and other films, please consider clicking subscribe. Thanks for watching again, and I'll see you all in the next one.